So, one of the things that I often see entrepreneurs struggle with is planning how to pass their legacy, pass what they're building on to the next generation. So, with that being said, I just want to give you a few simple tips on things that you can do, things that you can look into to make sure that you're locking in that legacy and passing it on to the next generation. All right, so number one, first and foremost, when we talk about passing on whatever you're building to the next generation, ultimately at the end of the day, we're talking about estate planning, right? Every estate plan should have a will. The benefit of having a will is that at the end of the day, it allows you to pass on whatever you own without having to specifically name those things that you own and specifically pass each of those things on. You can just say, out of everything that I own, half goes to this person, half goes to that person, or split it equally three ways between these three people, right? And so the will kind of acts as a catch-all to make sure that that property or those assets are divided in the way that you wanted them to be divided up between your beneficiaries and your heirs. Second main advantage about having a will is that it allows you to select the person who is going to be responsible for administering your estate. You get to choose someone who's trustworthy, someone who's organized, someone who's going to make sure that your will is followed in terms of how your assets and how your property is going to be passed on to the next generation. So the second piece of kind of any essential estate plan is going to be a power of attorney. Now, power of attorneys kind of come in different contexts and almost different flavors, so to speak. But essentially what a power of attorney is it's a document that gives someone the power to make legal, financial, healthcare, or other decisions in those circumstances where you don't have the capacity to make those decisions. And so the reason a power of attorney is so important is because as a business owner, something happens to you and for whatever reason you're unable to make decisions about your business, you need someone to be able to step in to take over and make those decisions that you're unable to make. And that will help to maintain the business's value. It'll help make sure that the business is paying its bills while you're, for whatever reason, unable to make those decisions. And so for entrepreneurs, for business owners, probably the third key document in your estate plan is going to be a trust agreement. Now, a trust is a legal entity that is set up in order to manage or hold property on behalf of certain named beneficiaries. And so the person who creates the trust is known as the settlor or the trustor or the grantor. And what they do is whatever property it is that they want to put in the trust, they're basically giving over legal ownership of that piece of property to a trustee who is responsible for managing that property and making decisions about that property while the trust is in existence and while the trust is holding that piece of property. And so the trustee is responsible for managing and holding that property according to the instructions that are laid out in the trust agreement and for the ultimate benefit of the beneficiaries. Right? So there are a few benefits to having a trust. And specifically in the estate planning context, we're often talking about a living or a revocable trust. The benefits of a living or a revocable trust are going to be, number one, you have the ability or the flexibility to change that trust prior to your passing away. So if you want to make changes to the trust, changes to the rules that the trustee has to follow, or changes to the decisions that the beneficiaries are able to make, whatever changes you want to make, you're able to make those up until the point when you pass away. Another benefit of a living trust is that those assets that belong to the trust don't have to go through probate. The relative disadvantage of a living trust or a revocable trust is that it's not going to provide you any sort of liability protection while you're alive. So while you're alive, you still have constructive control over that piece of property, and it isn't until you pass away that that legal ownership goes to the trustee, who is now in control of the property and control of making sure that it's either handled or passed on to your beneficiaries. And so you're not going to get the same sort of legal liability protection that you would get with a irrevocable trust. So in addition to those tools in your estate plan that you might use to help pass your legacy on to the next generation, there are a couple other things that business owners should have in mind. First on that list is going to be having an operating agreement. If you have an LLC or if you have a corporation, a shareholders agreement that outlines what happens if one of the owners of the business dies. And so, similar to having that power of attorney in place for your estate plan, having that operating agreement in place and having it lay out the succession plan in case something should happen to you as a business owner is going to be important to ensuring continuity in case something does happen to you. And so it's going to allow someone to easily kind of step in if you're a single member LLC and really maintain the value of the business. Because if something happens to you and you want to make sure that there's someone who knows what to do, there's someone who's going to be able to step right in and know what their role and responsibility is going to be. And your operating agreement can really lay that out. The other thing that an operating agreement is going to do, which is really important for business partners, is this going to say, well, if this business partner passes away, what happens to their share? Can they pass their share and their ownership in the business on to their spouse or on to their kids? And if they can pass that share along, do those heirs become partners in the business in the sense that they have a right to control of the business? And this is something that is critically important for business partners to lay out at the beginning, because at the end of the day, when you enter into a business partnership or a business relationship with someone, you're expecting to deal with them, right? So you might have a great relationship with them, but you might not have such a great relationship with their spouse or with their children, and you might not want to work with them. And so having that written operating agreement in place when you have business partners is going to help you really kind of determine and lay out, okay, if one of us passes away, here's what's going to happen to make sure that all the hard work that they put into the business, that their family, that their heirs are going to get the benefit of that, while at the same time making sure that the business partners who are remaining aren't going to have to enter into a actual partnership or have to work with someone who they didn't anticipate having to work with when they started the business if they don't want to. Last but not least is making sure that all of your documentation is in order. Like, you want to make sure that written contracts are all in order, that tax documents are in order and easily accessible, that business licenses or other legal compliance information is in order. But you also want to make sure, and this is critically important, that your SOPs, your standard operating procedures, information on how to run the business, on how to access critical software and critical data and information about the business. Having all of those things in place is going to be critical just to preserving the value of the business, to make it really easy and really simple in case something should happen to you, for somebody to be able to step in, understand what's going on, and pick up wherever you left off. That's going to help preserve the value of the business. It's going to make it easier for, if you're passing the business on to someone to run after you, it's going to make it easier for them to run it. It's also going to make it so that if the next generation doesn't want to manage the business, they can sell the business and get value out of it. They can unlock the value that's in that business in order to, fund whatever dreams or whatever visions they have for their future. So I hope this video kind of helped to lay out and paint the picture of the basics when it comes to preserving your legacy. If you like this video, make sure you hit the subscribe button so that you can see more. And also, if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. This is information and not advice. But I'm more than happy to help try to answer some questions that you might have, point you in the right direction if you leave a question in the comments, or even just use those questions as ways for me to create new videos. So definitely make sure you let me know what you think below the video.